Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Garbaugust, the worst BookTube event of them all, created by Ollie at Criminale last year. He had the inspired idea to make a BookTube video about trash, about garbage. He got a bunch of co-hosts. I was honored to be one of the co-hosts last year. He brought back all of those co-hosts this year and doubled the number of trashy suspect booktubers, where we're talking about garbage all throughout the month of August. And the month of August, believe it or not, is waning. So I had to take time off from Garbaugust because I had a bit of another commitment to do, but that is now done. So I'm back, and I'm adding a little trash to my reading rotisserie every night. And last night I added a gem also from 1975. I added this little gem, Kyrik Fights the Demon World by Gardner Fox. I think the fat guy is Kyrik on the cover there. I'm not really sure. Maybe not. But I think so. When I saw this cover at the Brattle, I could not pass this up, so I grabbed it. And I am not here to speak ill of Kyrik Fights the Demon World. I'm not here to speak ill of Gardner Fox. Not because this isn't trash. Oh my god. Oh my god, this is trash. But because I owe Gardner Fox a loyalty that I could never repay. I'm not going to speak ill of Gardner Fox for one simple reason. With the possible exception of Stan Lee, this is the writer I have read the most in my life. Simple as that. The only way that you could exclude him from that designation would be if you were a snob. And you said that comic books don't count as reading. But they do. There is no hierarchy of aesthetic endeavors. There is no hierarchy. Comic books do count. And Gardner Fox, I don't know how many comics he's written. I'm sure he didn't know. I'm sure no one has ever calculated how many comics he's written. And I've read a lot of them. A lot. And that forges a bond of affection between you and an author, even when that author does not deserve it. Which is the case here. You see on the cover, in the tradition of Conan. Yeah, yeah, that is this. Sorry for any background noise if you hear shaking or digging or choking. That is my little dog. I am sitting on a chair and that really bothers her. I'm right here, baby. You do not need to be going through these theatrics. You really don't. I'm right here. I'm a foot away from her. But no, it's not good enough because you can't join me on the chair. But anyway, this is very much in the tradition of Conan. Not just in terms of the character of Conan, but also in terms of Robert E. Howard's style of epic fantasy, of sword and sorcery fantasy. Kyrik is a little bit different because, much like Karl Edward Wagner's character, Cain, he is both sword and sorcerer. He is both the swordsman and the sorcerer. To an extent, he's mostly just a bruiser, but there's a little bit more subtlety involved here than if you're just a bruiser. If you have just a bruiser like Conan. Conan very much does not do sorcery. He doesn't trust it at all. But some characters, some fantasy writers thinking, well, I could just retread Conan. Or maybe, the obvious problem to hand, the obvious solution here to hand is to make my sword and sorcery character also a bit of both. And that can be done well, and that can be done poorly. and to that end, I want to read you a couple of passages here. But first, the first passage I want to read you is the prologue. I want to read you the whole of the prologue so that you know exactly what you're dealing with here. Because give Gardner Fox his props. When he enters into a kind of hackneyed subgenre, he enters into it well and truly. He throws himself into it. He is I guess what you could say, he's an excellent pastiche writer, whether he thinks it or not. Of course, Kyrik is not a pastiche. It's an original creation of his that I think had 5 or 6 books. This is the only one I've been fortunate enough to find. But, baby, what are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, baby. I swear. When she can access me directly, she doesn't. She thinks, oh, you're no big deal. But when she can't, she goes crazy. Anyway, I want to read you the prologue here so that you know the register of this book, because it never strays from this. Mackinaw opened dreaming eyes. For 500 centuries, Mackinaw, you just told us his name, thanks, had lain in his death that was not death, roaming in those worlds which his eldritch wizardry had created, raising great palaces from the stuff of imagery, worshipped by the denizens of the lands of his creation. Yet now he grew restless, stirred, and part of his consciousness roused to life. His mind quested through the eons, through the vast spaces which named him Lord. There was uneasiness in him, born of senses no longer mortal. Evil pulsed somewhere in those realms he knew and guarded. Evil which threatened, dared to menace. Let's have exclamation points. Now that which had been Mackinaw was wide awake, and the unease in his mind grew to wrathful anger. Who dared disturb Mackinaw? We got it. His name's Mackinaw, whose sorcery was feared in all the universe. This evil must be met, crushed. And so Mackinaw quested through spatial emptiness into lands that had known him long and long ago. He sent his mind across unfathomable distances, seeking, hunting, searching for that which so infuriated him. There had come a time when his consciousness drew back, away from what he had discovered. At the very edges of that black necromancy, he hung, using all his powers to penetrate the borderland of wickedness. Not as other wizards was Mackinaw. His powers were long forgotten, yet grew ever more potent. When he knew what it was that had disturbed him, he felt raw fury and even fear. For something alien, something tainted, was alive and gathering its strength, and there might be nothing he could do against it. Yet he would try. He would summon up those who could help him, and who with his aid might undo the evil which was being spawned upon the face of Terra, the world where Mackinaw had lived and worked his enchantments 500 centuries before. Illis, Illis of the emerald eyes, awake! Rise, sweet Illis, and go forth. Then Illis stirred in her own dreamings. ... Now, somewhere out there, in the recesses of stately Vaughn Manor, Michael K. Vaughan is going, oh, that was awesome. But I think the rest of us might be able to agree. That's awful. It's just awful stuff. And that's the prologue. That sets the tone. For the sorcerer's part of it. Now, let me give you a bit of the Conan part of this, because there's no point in denying that this is a Conan story. Let me give you just a bit of that, just a tiny bit. I won't read too much for you. Kyrik grunted, shifting Bluefang around so its hilt lay ready to his hand. His sword is named Bluefang. Conan never names a sword. Any sword is fine by him. That's kind of refreshing. One of the many ways in which Conan is refreshing. It's just as well I never liked running from a fight, and I have a feeling that we're riding into the worst I've ever known. They rode behind the two thieves, of course there are thieves, for many miles until the thatched rooftops and spires of Krakathan came into view, half hidden behind a high stone wall. Of course there's a high stone wall. The sun was lowering to the west. Its rays touched the metal spires and made them gleam blood red. Of course they did. Of course they made them gleam blood red. That imagery, approaching a group of people, swordsman and his swordsman lady and their thieves and their untrustworthy companions, slowly drudging their horses along to approach the high walls of a city whose high towers are going to gleam in the sunset like blood, is done about 100,000 times in Robert E. Howard. I think 50,000 of those times was just in one story. So that is, again, this is not to mock Gardner Fox. He wrote this because it was a market. He knew exactly what he was doing. So this is very much garbage where the author is in on the joke. And that made it wonderful. I absolutely loved it. I thought, never read any Kyrik novels before. I don't think I've read much of Gardner Fox's essays into epic fantasy. I would never find them. I would never go in search of them. I would have to find them just, for $1 at the Brattle. That would have to be the only way that I would do it. This thing held up remarkably well, as these old paperbacks, these troopers tend to do. But it held up in vain, because I'm never going to read this again. I may, to give Gardner Fox his due, I may read other Kyrik stories. If I encountered another Kyrik novel that wasn't this one, I would probably grab it for $1. And it would probably be an hour of enjoyment. This was. So there you go. That is your report, your trash pickup for Garbaugust 2023. I read one of Gardner Fox's Conan-esque, very Conan-esque fantasy stories. And I got out of it exactly what I wanted. Exactly what I expected. There were no surprises in here at all. There were no actually original turns of phrase in here. Blood red spires, eldritch energies, call him Lord, all that sort of stuff. I knew what I was going to get. The one interesting element in here was that Kyrik is not just a swordsman. He's not just a barbarian. There's also a little bit of sorcery around what he does, a little bit of warlocky stuff. So, and also Mackinaw, that guy Mackinaw at the beginning, you don't really know about his true intents for most of the book. You're under the impression that he is bringing to life an avatar of his power on Earth to fight evil, but we're also told that he himself is worshipped as a despotic god on thousands of planets. That's not exactly the act of a good guy. That element could have been explored. That ambiguity could have been delved into at great depth and make this a really interesting book, but not by Gardner Fox. And he's unfortunately the guy at the typewriter. So that's all we get. I enjoyed it anyway. I had a blast. As all Garbaugust stuff should be. Really, that is what we're doing here, is having fun. I have been mucking that up a little by yelling at the camera a couple of times, but I'm going to try and end Garbaugust on Kyrik fights the demon world kind of books. I think I'm going to try and do that. So that's my report for today. I will wrap this up, and I will see you next time. Thank you, BookTube.